The pistolero moved through the shadowed alleys of the border market with the steady, measured pace of a man who had long embraced the harshness of the West. His eyes, sharp and cold, scanned the dim light flickering against weathered stalls, settling finally on the two Apache twins, silent as the desert night. Without hesitation, he counted out a fistful of coins, the metallic clink breaking the heavy air, sealing a transaction that whispered both profit and peril. In that moment, the weight of uncertainty settled like dust in the dry wind. The market itself was a harsh symphony of sounds and scents. Barter voices grumbled low beneath the distant howl of coyotes. Leather boots shuffled against cracked earth, and the scent of smoke blended with sweat and dusty sagebrush. Lanterns swayed, casting tremulous shadows on faces lined by years of sun and struggle, where every man and woman wore survival like a second skin. This place, straddling lawlessness and order, was as unforgiving as the land it lay within. A crucible brittle with promises broken and alliances born in blood. The pistolero, known to many as a man who owed allegiance to no one but the next payday, regarded the twins as nothing more than goods to be moved, cold currency in a world measured by what could be held or taken. Yet, beneath his grizzled exterior, a flicker of unease grew as he noted their quiet bond. They shared glances unspoken, a mirrored understanding beyond the grasp of ordinary siblings. Though his years had tempered him against softness, he could not entirely disregard the strange gravity they exerted upon the air between them. On the lonely road away from the markets, grim embrace, the sun bowed behind distant mesas, reddening the horizon with an ominous glow. The pistolero shifted his weight in the saddle, keenly aware of an intangible tension threading the silence. The twins sat motionless, their dark eyes scanning the desolate expanse, alert to specters only they seemed to perceive. An invisible threat hung just beyond the ridge, a threat that stirred the hairs on the back of his neck, a peril that rejected the comfort of open daylight. In their reticence, the children conveyed a warning far graver than any spoken word. The first faint crackle of dried twigs beneath unseen feet set nerves taut. In response, subtle exchanges unfolded. A careful glance from the pistolero met a swift blink between the twins, their bond a shield stronger than any pistol at his side. Silent gestures passed between the three, fragile threads of trust woven in shadow and necessity. The pistolero's heart, hardened and mistrustful, battled the rise of something unfamiliar, a grudging respect seated in the stillness where words dared not tread. Yet stubborn pride kept his thoughts guarded, his grip steady on the reins, unwilling to offer the vulnerability that these enigmatic children demanded. As darkness thickened, the campfire's glow flickered against weathered hands and the rugged face of the pistolero. A sudden, sharp sound, an intrusion from the surrounding black, cut through the quiet like a whisper of doom. The twins stiffened, their small forms alert and unyielding. Their eyes met his, wide and shadowed with grave understanding. The adversary trailing them was no random danger. It was a calculated threat, closing in. Night itself seemed to draw a curtain tight around their fragile circle, sealing them within a coil of uncertainty and imminent trial. The pistolero's breath hitched, a battle of wills shining behind his steely gaze as the moment of reckoning edged near. Many companions, sharing tales of these forgotten lands, have confided that the restless hands of fate, or perhaps the merciless algorithms of YouTube, sometimes sever subscriptions without a sound. Before the next perilous trail unfurls and a new twist shatters the quiet, take a quick glance below this tale and make certain you remain signed in with our band so you won't lose the thread of this unfolding legend. We don't want you to miss a single voice echoing from this rugged valley. Check your subscription now and join our saga. Night had deepened its grip across the arid landscape, swallowing the dim glow of the fading campfire. The pistolero's eyes narrowed as the crackling of twigs and hushed whispers pierced the stillness. He was no stranger to danger, but this assault was unexpected, and it was coming for the Apache twins under his reluctant charge. Before he could fully mount a defense, shadowy figures emerged, their movements swift and deliberate, the glint of weapons briefly catching the firelight. The bandits were ruthless men, bent on claiming whatever spoils the pistolero carried. Ignorant of the peculiar value the twins held beyond mere survival, the attack came sudden and fierce. Bullets cracked through the thin night air. The pistolero dropped to the ground behind a fallen log, pulling the twins close. To his surprise, the children moved with a grace and agility that belied their years. Silent as desert foxes, they slipped through the underbrush, disappearing and reappearing, dodging the violent rain of lead. Their movements weren't just instinct. They showed a sharp intelligence, a natural cunning forged in shadows and silence. An uneasy alliance forged in the heat of battle began to flicker in the pistolero's heart. His hands, steady as ever on his revolver, found themselves watching the twins, not as mere property, but as something fiercely alive and unyielding. For the first time, he felt the thin walls of his guarded self begin to crack. The children were no helpless goods. They were survivors, wily and stubborn, hearts beating with unexpected fire. The night stretched on, every moment charged with tension. The bandits pressed their assault, but the pistolero and the twins fought back, not just with bullets, but with quiet resolve and cunning. Shadows shifted. The pistolero's senses sharpened as the twins' eerie synchronicity became a shield. Their eyes sparked with fleeting glances. Their small hands gestured. Rapid, private signals known only to each other. The pistolero, reluctant to admit it aloud, recognized something mysterious in their bond, a depth beyond simple kinship, something almost sacred. As the attackers faltered, retreating into the night with murmurs of frustration, the faintest rustle alerted the trio to a new presence. A lean silhouette stepped forward from the tree line, framed by moonlight and carrying the weight of years carved into his craggy face. The old hunter's gaze was sharp, penetrating without warmth. His boots sank softly into the dust, and his hands rested easily on a rifle that had seen countless battles. He spoke with a slow, deliberate cadence. "You're not out of danger yet, friend," he said, eyes flicking to the twins. Those two ain't ordinary. I know what you've got there, and it'll cost more than you reckon to. Keep 'em safe." The pistolero hardened his expression, wary of the stranger's intentions. "I'm no man to bargain when a gun's pointed my way," he growled. Yet beneath his words, a tension tightened. This was no simple encounter. The hunter's knowledge ran deeper than rumor. There was an edge of obsession in his voice, a hunger for something the pistolero couldn't yet grasp. The twins, silent observers until now, exchanged a few quick words in their native tongue. Soft, whispered syllables like gentle winds over rocky crags. Their eyes met the pistolero's, wide and pleading, as if to warn him to be cautious. What secrets did they carry? What ancient powers whispered through their shared bloodline? The pistolero's mind raced, caught between growing protective instincts and the shadow of suspicion. Was this old hunter a friend, or just another threat lurking in the endless dusk? Without another word, the hunter crouched beside the fire, the twins flanking the pistolero as the night held its breath around them. The air thickened with unspoken danger, and the fragile trust they'd begun to form balanced on an unforgiving edge. Above them, the stars swept silently across a sky endless and indifferent, while the wind whispered of trails yet untaken and enemies still hidden. The campfire's flicker seemed more fragile now, a lone beacon defying the dark. And in the silence, a distant howl cut sharp, a cold reminder that this land was no place for the weak. The old hunter's eyes glinted coldly in the firelight. "I'll be coming with you, not as company, but as a shadow on your tail. You'll need to watch your back." The pistolero's jaw clenched. A deadly choice loomed ahead. Trust this man and gain an uneasy ally, or risk facing the dangers that stalked them alone. As the embers died low, the twins huddled close, their small bodies a fierce anchor in the sprawling desert night. Their silent presence was a challenge, an enigma wrapped in survival and unexpected hope. Without warning, a flicker of movement at the edge of the clearing made the pistolero draw his revolver with grim purpose. The camp had just been found. The next battle was imminent. The old hunter's shadow lengthened, where the firelight barely reached. His eyes, cold and calculating, flicked from the twins to the pistolero as he spoke again, voice low and deliberate. "Those boys, they ain't just children. They carry something old, something the land itself remembers." The twins' dark eyes locked silently. They exchanged soft words in their native tongue, their whispers weaving between the crackling embers like a secret chant. The pistolero stiffened, heart tightening with a cocktail of suspicion and something he refused to name, an uneasy protectiveness blooming beneath his rough exterior. Suddenly, one of the twins bolted without warning, his small feet vanishing swiftly into the surrounding thickets. Silence swallowed the camp like a heavy curtain, broken only by the pistolero's sharp breath. His instincts screamed danger, and the fragile thread of control slipping through his fingers. Without hesitation, the pistolero sprang after the fleeing child, his boots pounding harsh against the dry earth. The old hunter followed, his rifle steady, but eyes never losing the other twin perched watchful beside the dying fire. Shadows cast by spindly mesquite branches tangled and danced as the pursuers plunged deeper into the brush. Ahead the boy moved with a ghostly grace, slipping deftly through the labyrinth of rocks and cacti. The pistolero's mind raced, scrambled fragments of memory, stirring unbidden. A vague echo of something held just beyond reach. The boy's steps faltered as roots and stones caught his ankle. The pistolero seized the moment, grabbing the child gently yet firmly. In the pale moonlight, he glimpsed a worn piece of leather, tied tightly around the boy's neck, a small amulet etched with twisting symbols. Back at the camp, the old hunter crouched beside the other twin, eyes narrowed as he fingered a similarly carved pendant concealed beneath the boy's tattered shirt. "Power like this," the hunter murmured, "has drawn men into death or madness before." The twins' faces remained serene but wary, their silent wisdom cloaked in youthful bodies. The pistolero returned, holding the first child close, mind swimming with questions that clawed at the edges of his seasoned silence. "What do these mean?" he demanded, voice rough as gravel. The hunter met his gaze with a grim certainty. "Shamanic signs, a link to their bloodline. You bought more than you knew." That night, thoughts roiled in the pistolero's chest like storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The amulet's presence pried at something long buried, a shadowed fragment of his past, ghosts of a life lived between gunfire and regrets. He turned the amulet over in calloused hands, tracing the ancient marks that seemed to pulse faintly, as if alive. The twins huddled near the fire, their whispered exchanges never ceasing. Though never spoken aloud to the pistolero, their words held weight. Warnings, prayers, perhaps even pleas for understanding. The air grew thick with unspoken truths and chilling possibilities. The old hunter's intrusion cast a long silence over the camp. He was no mere guide, but a man driven by obsession, eyes dark with conviction. "Keep them close," he warned, voice low and urgent. "The world beyond this circle hunts shadows, and those shadows thirst for what the boys carry." The pistolero's hands went to his revolver, fingers tightening around the worn grip as his gaze swept the moonlit expanse. A primal part of him bristled, ejecting weakness and blind trust alike. Yet the twins' presence tugged at something more, an inexplicable bond that defied his hardened creed. Suddenly, a rustle shattered the fragile quiet. A pair of gleaming eyes caught in the underbrush blinked once, twice, then vanished. The campfire flickered wildly, shadows stuttering and leaping, as if alive with secrets. The pistolero froze, senses sharpening. The chase, the old hunter's warnings, the amulet's strange pull, it all converged into a singular, undeniable truth. The boys were no ordinary cargo. They were the key to a story as old and ruthless as the desert winds. He glanced at the twins. One held tightly to the other's hand, steady and small, their faces masks of quiet strength and defiance. The pistolero's jaw clenched. His role was shifting. A guard, a guardian, perhaps even something like family. The night stretched on, heavy with anticipation and danger. The stars wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses to the fragile alliance forming around the flickering fire. As the first light of dawn bled pale gold across the mesas, the pistolero made a hard decision. He would decipher the past tangled in the amulet's design, protect the twins from the hunter's relentless pursuit, and above all, confront the truths buried in his own shadowed history. But before the rising sun could warm the barren land, a quiet moment shattered. The pistolero's boot struck something half buried in the dirt, a wooden talisman carved in the same strange symbols as the amulet. His breath caught, mind hazy with forgotten memories. In that instant, the bonds of past and present tightened like a noose, and the path ahead darkened with looming threats neither gun nor wile could easily repel. The camp stirred restlessly as distant, muffled voices rose from the ridge. The old hunter's shadow grew longer, his grin thin and wolfish. "They're coming," he said, voice threading into the morning air like a knife's edge. The pistolero's eyes met the twins, steady, unyielding, holding secrets older than the desert sands. A new chapter was beginning, from which none would emerge unchanged. The revelation pierced the smoky dawn air like the crack of a distant rifle shot. The twins, descendants of an ancient Apache shaman, bound by a powerful spiritual thread, were no mere children to be bought or sold. They were bearers of a legacy that could shift the very balance of the rugged land around them. The pistolero sat by the flickering embers, the weight of the amulet heavy in his calloused hand. He traced the worn symbols, feeling a strange warmth pulse beneath his fingers, a heartbeat echoing from a past long buried beneath layers of gunpowder and dust. The twins huddled silently near the fire's edge, their dark eyes reflecting both the flicker of flames and the shadow of secrets too vast for words. Their bond had deepened beyond mere blood. It was as if an ancient current ran unseen between their souls, a tether that no force could sever. Without consequence, movement shattered the fragile calm. Sounds a rustling in the mesquite and the distant grinding of boots over rock. The pistolero's gaze swept the horizon, muscles tensing like coiled steel. The old hunter and his gang crept closer, the predator's shadow lengthening with the rising sun. His mind seized, wrestling between flight and fight. Years ago, he had learned when to run and when to stand. But these twins, this inexplicable charge, had twisted his hardened resolve into something else entirely. He no longer counted survival as a solitary currency. Now it was balance, choice, and the fragile thread of trust that tied him to these children, who moved with the wisdom of the earth beneath them. Before him, the old hunter's dark eyes glinted with cold calculation. "They mean more than coins, friend," the man warned, voice low but sharp, "and the gang's coming to claim what they believe belongs to them, no matter the cost." The pistolero's fingers closed over the revolver's worn grip. Every instinct screamed defense, but the weight in his gut told a deeper story. This fight wasn't about coin or blood money anymore. It was about protecting something old and sacred, something that even he, with his mercenary heart, couldn't deny was worth fighting for. Suddenly, the distant rumble of hooves shattered the dawn stillness. Dust rose like a specter across the ridge, blurring shapes into snarls of movement. The gang was here. Without hesitation, the pistolero gathered the twins, their small hands clutching his leathered forearm as he urged them away from the camp. The river lay ahead, their one chance for escape or ambush. But the water had betrayed them. Its bed was cracked and bone, dry, a ribbon of dust where life should flow. A cold knot of desperation settled in his chest. The old hunter's men closed in with cruel precision, voices ragged but determined. There was no easy exit from this trap. The twins exchanged a glance, their silent conversation swift and sharp. Their faces, young yet marred by timeless knowledge, hardened with resolve. The pistolero watched the smallest twitch of muscle and understood that surrender was not an option, not for them, not for him. He scanned the barren riverbed, eyes narrowing on tangled brush and rocky crags, places where shadows could bend and conceal. A plan emerged, unspoken but clear: survive the onslaught by turning the land itself into an ally. The gang's approach cut sharp through the stillness, the clatter of weapons vibrant with menace. The pistolero pulled the twins close, heart pounding with a new kind of purpose, fierce and unyielding. This was no longer a transaction. This was survival, and the price was far greater than he once imagined. A sudden crack echoed as a rider urged his horse forward. The first contact. The pistolero took the lead, the twins' hands tight in his. The ground beneath their boots vibrated with the pounding charge of the gang's frenzy. Gunfire sang through the empty air, bullets tearing through dust and stone. The pistolero ducked behind a charred boulder. The twins pressed close, their eyes sharp and alert. In those moments, the children's presence was a fierce and silent shield, their movements graceful, their reactions instinctive. Yet the fight was not theirs to win with bullets alone. It was a battle of will and wit against overwhelming odds. The old hunter's gang was ruthless, closing the net tighter with each passing breath. The pistolero's voice broke the cacophony, low and quick. Stay close. We use the land, every shadow, every whisper of wind. Together they slipped into the maze of the dry riverbed, rocks jagged and unforgiving underfoot. The twins darted ahead with uncanny stealth, disappearing into thick brush before reappearing like ghosts, guiding him past unseen dangers and deadly snare traps crafted with cold intention. Each step was a gamble, each breath a prayer against the rising tide of enemies. The pistolero's thoughts flared with memories, ghosts of old battles, lost comrades, and a code he had long tried to forget. But the twins' silent strength rekindled a light he thought extinguished. Hope, reckless and raw. As the sun climbed higher, the gang's shouts grew frantic. The chase was relentless. Suddenly, the pistolero stumbled, an ankle twisting painfully over a hidden root. He gritted his teeth, the pain fire sharp in his bones. But the twins circled back without hesitation. One twin reached out, fingers pressing gently against his arm, calm amidst the chaos. The other scanned the ridge above, eyes narrowing at a sudden movement. Before the pistolero could react, a volley of bullets whipped past, shards of earth spraying at their feet. The old hunter's men had cut off their retreat. The pistolero pushed himself up, the twins clutching his coat like lifelines. There was no time for fear now, only the sting of urgency and the heavy breath of impending confrontation. "Stay sharp," he hissed. "We're not done yet." The twins exchanged a fleeting smile, fierce and knowing, as if their spirits already danced beyond the threat of death. Then, from the crest of the bank, voices rose, a harsh laughter fractured by the crack of rifles. The pistolero leveled his gaze toward the coming storm. His grip tightened on the amulet still hanging beneath his coat, feeling its pulse sync with his own. The gang's ambush closed in fast, and in that crucible of dust and gunfire, the pistolero was torn between the man he had been and the guardian he was becoming. The riverbed was no longer just a place of desolation. It was the theater where fate would decide if these unlikely miracles could survive the frontier's unforgiving grasp. The pistolero's breath caught as the thundering hooves echoed nearer. Suddenly, the gang surged from their hidden positions, descending like wolves ready to tear the fragile family apart. The twins clung tightly to the pistolero, two small shadows beneath the merciless sun, their eyes burning with a fire no bullet could quench. The river's dry bones stretched before them, and fate's cruel hand cast its final die. In the chaos, the gang's leader lunged forward, dark eyes glinting with cold triumph, and the world fractured with the crack of a gunshot. The pistolero's world tilted violently. They were separated. The twins vanished into the dust and fury, leaving him stranded and exposed on the barren riverbed. The hunt was no longer a game of possession. It was a war for survival, and in the silence that followed the roar, the pistolero's heart hammered with one terrifying truth. He was alone. The sun bled pale in the early morning sky, casting a frail light over the cracked and lifeless riverbed. The pistolero's boots crunched sharply against the parched earth, each step a bitter reminder of the trap they had fallen into. Around him, the silence was heavy, oppressive as the heat that pressed down like a weight on his weathered shoulders. The twins clung to his sides, their hands tight and unwavering, faces composed yet alert. Their dark eyes scanned the barren landscape, searching for any thread of refuge amid the desolation. Between the jagged rocks and brittle brush, hope seemed as thin as the dust, whispering in the dry wind. His heart thudded with a growing unease. The old hunter's warnings thundered in his mind. This place, once a sanctuary in their desperate flight, had become a cage, and the danger lurked beyond every crest, behind every silent shadow. A sudden rattle from the ridge snapped the pistolero's attention upward. Figures emerged, their silhouettes harsh against the morning light. The gang had come. Their heavy boots pounded mercilessly on the earth, voices ragged and low with cruel intent. The pistolero tightened his grip on the reins of control, slipping fast. "Keep close. Use the land," he murmured, voice a growl barely louder than the wind. The twins moved with uncanny grace, weaving through the fractured riverbed's maze. Their small bodies slipped like shadows past thorny brush, their footsteps silent and precise. Silent signals passed between them and him, a choreography born not of words, but of shared survival. A bullet tore the air beside them, shattering a distant rock and sending cascades of dust into the stillness. The pistolero dropped behind a jagged boulder, pulling the twins into the scant cover it offered. He could feel their breaths, steady despite the violence unfolding, a pulse as fierce and unfaltering as the desert sun. Fire spat from the other side, the gang pressing forward with relentless cruelty. They knew no mercy. They sought the twins as prize, not prey. The pistolero's mind flickered to the amulet hanging beneath his coat, the strange artifact pulsing faintly against his skin, alive with a history he barely dared comprehend. "Don't let him surround us," he hissed, eyes sharp and scanning. Every muscle in his body tensed, the fight sparking fury and fear in equal measure. From somewhere beyond the bone-dry riverbed, rock and brush shifted. The smallest twin darted ahead, vanishing briefly into the labyrinth of shadows before reappearing with the older boy guiding the way. Their silent wisdom turned the barren path into a labyrinth of life, hidden crevices and shadowed hollows where bullets would falter and pursuers stumble. The pistolero followed, limping slightly as his ankle protested with a searing jolt. Pain blurred focus, yet he forced each step forward, the twins' steadfast presence anchoring him in a reality harsher than any he'd known. Suddenly, a crack as sharp as a rifle's blast echoed behind them. The old hunter's men had closed the net, trapping them in a deadly vice. Shots tore through the ragged air. The pistolero dove low, dragging the twins behind a thorny thicket that scraped and tore at their clothes. Bert floated like ash around them, mixing with the scent of gunpowder and sweat. Their pursuers grew closer, voices snarling commands, the hunt edging toward its brutal crescendo. The pistolero's jaw clenched as his mind spun, a swirl of memories, ghosts of battles past haunting his every breath. But something new kindled within, a stubborn flame of protectiveness, bitter and raw. These children had stirred in him a humanity he had long buried. Beneath layers of grit and cynicism, one twin's hand pressed against his arm, calm and steady. The other's sharp eyes caught movement above, shadowing an ambush unseen by the rest. In that moment, the pistolero knew their survival hinged not on gunfire alone, but on their unity, their combined will against the unforgiving bleakness. "Stay with me," he whispered, voice rough with resolve. The gang surged forward, a snarling tide lurching onto the open ground. The pistolero rose from cover, revolver steady, eyes flicking between the advancing shapes and the twins beside him. In a blur of dust and motion, gunshots cracked and echoed, shattering the eerie morning calm. Time seemed fragmented, moments stretched, taut between life and death. The smallest twin crouched, murmuring words in their ancient tongue, hands tracing delicate arcs through the air. A faint shimmer shivered around them, elusive as a desert mirage. The pistolero's breath caught. Was it real, or had desperation cracked his mind? Before he could dwell on the vision, a rider leapt from behind a boulder, gun aiming deadly at their backs. The pistolero twisted sharply, firing twice. The attack was repelled, but the charge had left them exposed. Chaos bloomed. The leader of the gang, eyes cold as obsidian, seethed ahead, cutting a brutal path through the dust. He lunged at the pistolero with a savage snarl. This was no longer a hunt, but a final reckoning. In the pandemonium, hands were torn apart. The twins were yanked from his grasp, two small silhouettes swallowed by the swirling dust and fury. A hollow emptiness ripped through the pistolero's chest as they vanished, leaving him stranded and vulnerable in the vast, merciless riverbed. He lowered his revolver slowly, shadows gathering beneath his eyes. The dry earth bore witness to his solitary form, a man shattered, torn between the ghost of the mercenary he had been and the guardian he was becoming. The wind swept across the barren landscape, carrying with it a dire truth. The hunt was no longer a transaction. It had become a war for survival, and the pistolero was alone. The desert night was thick with a silence so dense it seemed to swallow every breath. The pistolero sat still by the fading campfire, his eyes fixed on the twins who huddled close together, their faces calm masks that bore secrets older than the stars above. Hours ago, he had witnessed what defied all reason, a shimmering apparition that danced on the edge of sight, a manifestation born from the twins' mysterious power. That vision lingered in his mind, like smoke curling through a darkened room, taunting and impossible to ignore. His heart, once a hardened fortress, softened imperceptibly. The rugged mercenary who traded children as commodities was unraveling. Beneath the grit, something tender, almost reverent, took root. But the fragile peace shattered like cracked glass when distant voices drifted through the night air, rough whispers carried on the desert wind. The campfire's warm glow flickered uneasily, casting long shadows that stretched and writhed beyond the clearing. Eyes scanned the darkness, too many to count, moving with predator's purpose. The old hunter emerged from the shadows, his gaze sharp and relentless, a wolf among scared lambs. His lips curled into a grim smirk. "They're found us," he said quietly, voice dry as dust, "and they aren't waiting for the moon to climb higher." The pistolero's jaw clenched. This man was no mere companion. He was an obsession personified, a relentless shadow trailing the twins' trail. The hunter's fixation burned with cold fire, a hunger that chilled the pistolero's blood more than any bullet ever could. The twins exchanged a brief glance, silent, urgent. They spoke in their ancient tongue, soft as wind over sun-baked rock, words which the pistolero could not understand, but felt the weight of nonetheless. Their whispers seemed to tether the night itself, as if calling upon the very earth to rise in their defense. The pistolero rose slowly, his silhouette dark against the dying embers. He moved to gather what little they had, his gaze locked with the twins, whose dark eyes reflected both fear and a fierce determination. This was no longer mere survival. It was a battle fought on a plain unseen by most men. The silent rustle in the brush betrayed the arrival of enemy spies, watchers who had crept close under the shroud of darkness. Their footsteps were soft but certain, encircling the camp like circling vultures, anticipating a feast. Without warning, the quiet exploded into chaos. Gunmetal glinted as rifles were drawn, eyes filled with merciless intent. The twins jumped to their feet, their every movement fluid, almost otherworldly. The pistolero's hand dove for his revolver, steadying the shaking barrel under the pressure that twisted his insides. Before the first shout had faded, figures emerged, shadows melting into shape, closing in fast. The enemy's plan was brutal and precise. Overwhelm all who stood between them and the prize, the two children, whose blood bore a power far beyond any of them. The air snapped with gunfire, sharp and unforgiving. Bullets tore through scrub and stone, catching glints of moonlight like deadly fireflies. The pistolero dove behind a jagged boulder, pulling the twins close, their bodies trembling but unbroken. He felt their silent pulse, steady and fierce against his own racing heartbeat. Through the rain of lead, the twins communicated swiftly. Silent signals passed like lightning between their locked gazes and nimble gestures. They were not helpless. They were protectors in their own right, instinct and spirit entwined. The old hunter snarled orders from deeper within the shadows, his voice a venomous hiss fueling the attack. But the pistolero's resolve had transformed. He was no longer the man driven by cold profit, but a guardian forged in fire and fear. Every bullet he fired sang with desperate purpose. One spy faltered, caught off guard by a twin's sudden dive, the child's motion a graceful blur disappearing into thick mesquite. The other twin darted toward the edge of the camp, eyes sharp as coiled steel, noticing a flicker of movement among the hillocks. The pistolero spotted it next, a faint glimmer of metal, a shadow shifting unnatural beneath the stars. A scout had pierced their defenses. "Hold tight!" the pistolero barked, voice rough with urgency. The twins moved as one, drawing the pistolero into their silent dance of survival. Around them, the desert breathed with ancient life, as if recognizing the sacred charge they carried. Shots rang louder, voices closer. Dust exploded in gusts, blinding and choking. The pistolero gritted his teeth against the sting, each breath sharp in the dry air. A volley cracked too close, stones shattered near his boots. The twins shielded him instinctively, tiny arms slicing the air in arcs that seemed to weave a protective thread around their small, battered circle. The old hunter's laughter broke through, the sound of cruelty and madness. "You can't hide forever, friend," he taunted from the darkness. "They'll tear you apart for those boys." The pistolero's steady gaze met the hunter's. His fingers curled tightly around the amulet, hidden beneath his coat. The pulse of that ancient talisman sinking with the hammering of his heart. "No," the pistolero growled. "I won't let them." As reinforcements snarled on the ridge, gunmen pressing their advantage, the camp's fragile light began to flicker. Suddenly, a sharp cry split the chaos. From the hill crest, a cluster of enemy spies surged forward, cutting off their retreat. The pistolero's breath hitched. He reached for the twins to pull them close, but in the flash of dust and gunfire, the shadows swallowed them whole. In the frenzied roar, the unthinkable happened. The pistolero was yanked away, separated from the twins, stranded amid the barren, dry riverbed. His heart slammed against his ribs as he dropped to one knee, the unforgiving earth harsh beneath his hands. They were gone. The night swallowed his desperate shouts, and the silence that followed was heavier than death. The hunt had turned, and the pistolero, once cold and merciless, was utterly alone. The punishing sun beat down mercilessly as they fled into the unforgiving vastness of the desert. Dust clung to every fold of their worn clothing, swirling in the wake of their desperate flight. The pistolero's breath rattled in his chest, uneven and ragged, matching the quickened pounding of his heart. Behind him, the ragged chorus of pursuers' shouts echoed sharp and relentless across the barren landscape. The twins pressed close to his side. 2. Silent shadows melting into the cruel embrace of the dry riverbed. Their small hands gripped the pistolero's leathered forearm with fierce determination, their dark eyes scanning every ridge and rock for the faintest promise of refuge. The once lifeless riverbed stretched before them, a cracked serpent of bone-white earth, dry and merciless in its silence. For a moment, all three stood still, the scorching heat pressing down like an invisible weight. The cracked riverbed held no mercy, no water to sustain, no foliage to hide beneath. Hope thinned like the dust swirling around their boots. Yet the twins moved with uncanny grace, their feet never faltering on jagged stones, their every step measured as if grounded by some ancient rhythm beneath their skin. The pistolero's gritted jaw betrayed the storm within. Each breath tasted of grit and iron, an echo of battles past, leading into the desperate fight to survive this one. The old hunter's warnings thumped like a relentless drumbeat in his mind. This place was a trap. No sanctuary in sight. No chance save quick wits and sharper steel. Suddenly, the dry silence shattered with the thunderous ripple of hooves ripping through the dust ahead. The gang appeared, a dark wave cresting the horizon with cruel snarls and flashing guns. Their leader's eyes burned with a chilling hunger, teeth clenched in savage promise. The hunt closed in fast. "Stay close," the pistolero urged, voice low but firm. "Use every shadow, every broken stone. We ain't finished yet." The twins responded without words, with whispered signals, subtle blinks, tight nods. They guided the pistolero through the labyrinth of the riverbed. Their shared knowledge of the land was instinctive, a dance, executed in perfect silence. They moved like wraiths over brittle brush and jagged rocks, slipping into narrow crevices and hidden hollows no pursuer would dare enter. But the dry earth gave no quarter, and the gang pressed harder. Shots cracked like thunder, tearing through the brittle air with sharpened urgency. The pistolero twisted behind a scorched boulder as bullets chipped stone and sent plumes of dust billowing. The twins crouched beside him, their steady breathing a heartbeat against the roar. Pain lanced through his ankle, twisted, raw, but the pistolero forced himself onward, each step a fight against the burning sting. The twins pressed closer, fingers lightly tracing his arm in silent reassurance. Despite the razor-edge danger, Their silent strength steadied him. No longer was he a man running alone. They had become the core of something unwelcome, but undeniable. A fragile family, forged in fire. Suddenly a sharp crack split the air behind them. A warning shot and a signal of encirclement. The old hunter's men had closed the noose, tightening their trap around the survivors. Voices snarled cruel commands, the sound of boots crunching over grit and stone growing nearer. The pistolero barked a terse command. "Don't get sleepy now. Keep with me." The younger twin vanished into a tangle of mesquite, reappearing moments later with the older brother guiding a safer path. Their swift, ghost-like movements seemed impossible for such small frames, the wisdom of ages emanating from youthful faces. Together they navigated the maze, slipping past snares and hidden dugouts laid by the hunter's relentless pack. A volley of bullets zinged past, shredding brittle grasses, scarring the hard earth. The pistolero fired back, each shot laced with desperation and fury, a man protecting more than just his skin. The twins darted and weaved, their native tongue whispered quietly, strange symbols in the air cast like silent spells meant to shield or summon aid from the land itself. The gang pushed forward, relentless as a storm. The leader lunged with savage intent, eyes cold as obsidian, severing the fragile thread of their escape. Amid the chaos, the pistolero felt hands wrenched tight, tearing the twins from his grasp like leaves caught in angry gusts. A hollow ache ripped through him as the children vanished into the maelstrom of dust and gunfire. Falling to one knee, the pistolero's world tilted violently. The barren riverbed stretched empty and cruel beneath the bleeding sun. And for the first time, a crushing silence settled deep within the mercenary's chest. They were gone. Alone amid the parched bones of the earth, the pistolero's hand closed tightly around the amulet beneath his coat, its ancient pulse thrumming against the skin, a heartbeat shared, distant, yet fiercely alive. The hunt was no longer a simple game of possession. It had turned into a brutal war for survival. And the pistolero, once a hardened man of cold trade, was utterly and painfully alone. The twins lay pale and still beneath the cloudless sky, their breaths shallow, eyes half closed in a fragile haze. The dry riverbed stretched endlessly around them, a barren cradle of cracked earth and restless dust. The sun, cruel and relentless, beat down upon their frail bodies as the pistolero knelt between them, his rough hands trembling with urgency and fear. His fingers fumbled over the wound's ragged edges on the older twin's side, the blood darkening the worn fabric of his shirt. Every touch was a desperate plea, an unspoken promise to hold them from slipping away. The youngest twin's small hand reached for his, clutching tightly like a lifeline. Their silent bond, more profound than any words could capture. The pistolero's gaze darted to the horizon, where the first faint dust clouds began to swell, heralding the approach of the hunter's gang. The old hunter's relentless shadow lingered in his mind, a grim reminder that mercy was a forgotten currency in these lands. Time pressed upon them like the parching heat. The miracle that were these children, hung by a thread finer than the desert wind. He swallowed hard, the grit in his throat thickening his words when he finally spoke. "You gotta hold on, both of you. No falling behind now." But even as the sentence left his lips, the weight of uncertainty dragged at his soul. How many times had he gambled on survival and lost? A shudder passed through the twins, their eyes flickering with ancient fire, a fire that neither pain nor peril could extinguish. The pistolero found strange comfort in that gaze. These children were not just survivors. They were a force woven from a past older than the worn leather of his boots. Their retreat was no longer quiet. Every movement was charged with the urgency of desperation. The pistolero fashioned a rough sling from his torn shirt, securing the wounded twin's arm against his chest. The youngest limped beside him, every step a testament to resilience that refused to bend. The cracked riverbed seemed endless, a labyrinth of shadows and sharp stones, an unforgiving path that offered no shelter, no reprieve. The brothers whispered in their native tongue, their voices soft yet resolute, guiding the pistolero through narrow crevices and over sun-baked ridges. Words meant only for them, threading through silent desperation like a lifeline. Behind them, the hunters' gang moved with brutal precision, their heavy boots pounding over brittle brush, guns raised and ready, breath harsh with anticipation. The outlaw's heart pounded fiercely, rage mixing with raw protectiveness. He was a relic of a mercenary past, yet now a guardian anchored by something far more precious than gold or gunpowder. Stumbling over a hidden root, the pistolero cursed under his breath, pain flaring sharp and sudden in his ankle. The youngest twin circled back without hesitation, fingers steady as he pressed a cool hand to the bruised spot. The gesture was small but profound, an unyielding tether binding them in this relentless dance of survival. A head movement, a ragged plume of dust flickered, and sharp voices tore through the stillness like a viper's strike. The hunter's men had closed in, their trap tightening with cruel certainty. "Keep moving," the pistolero hissed, voice rough with exhaustion and fierce resolve. "Don't let 'em cut us off." The twins exchanged a fleeting look, their silent communication a flicker of hope amidst the encircling shadows. The older brother's eyes burned with quiet wisdom, nearly weightless despite his weakness. The air seemed heavy, the ground cracked and barren, but their spirits defied the crushing desolation. The gang's leader emerged from the haze, his face hard and unyielding, eyes cold as fractured ice. He spat words thick with menace. "End of the line, pistolero. Hand over the kids, and maybe I'll let you walk away." The outlaw's hand went instinctively to his revolver, fingers curling around the worn grip with unwavering determination. "You want 'em? You'll have to take 'em from my cold hands," he growled, voice low and deadly certain. Gunfire erupted like thunder, ripping through the fragile desert stillness. The twins crouched low, their movements purposeful and fluid, silent shadows flitting between rocks and thorny brush. The pistolero aimed and fired, each shot a defiance against impending doom. Amidst the cacophony, the twins began their whispered incantations, words steeped in ancient power and bloodline secrets. The air seemed to shimmer, the world swaying as if acknowledging their unbroken spirit. The pistolero's breath caught. Years of hardened disbelief faltered before the tangible pulse of something sacred. Suddenly, the youngest twin's sharp eyes caught a movement in the thickets. Enemy spies, closing from the ridge, cutting off their path. The pistolero pivoted, firing into the shadows as the oldest twin reached for his brother's hand, steadying him with a quiet strength that belied his youth. The hunt narrowed with brutal efficiency. The gang pressed forward relentlessly, their voices sinister and lungs burning with the promise of capture. In the chaos, the gang's leader lunged, a cruel grin twisting his face. The pistolero met the charge head-on, revolver blazing, muscles straining against the brutal tug of fate. But then, an instant, a fierce wrenching. The twins were torn from his grasp, swallowed by the swirling dust and gunfire, two small shapes dissolving into the merciless void. The outlaw collapsed to one knee, the barren earth unforgiving beneath his bruised frame. His revolver slid from slack fingers, a cold tremor coursing through his battered soul. Alone, desolation wrapped the cracked riverbed like a suffocating shroud. The pistolero's breath shuddered, the weight of loss pressing down harder than the merciless sun. A single faint pulse throbbed beneath his coat, the ancient amulet cradled close to his heart. The hunt had become a war, and the man who once sought only profit now faced the cruelest fight of all, for family, for miracles, for survival itself. Across the dusty expanse, the distant shouts grew louder. Figures emerged from the swirling haze, relentless as death. The pistolero's jaw clenched, eyes burning with a fierce, unyielding flame. The showdown was at hand, the final reckoning beginning with the sun sinking low, setting the desert ablaze in blood-red fire. The dry riverbed stretched endlessly under the blistering sun, cracked and silent, a vast expanse that seemed to swallow every hope. The pistolero knelt amidst the dust, his breath ragged, muscles burning with fatigue and pain. His wounded ankle throbbed with each uneven step he'd taken. His revolver, once steady in his hand, now hung loosely at his side. Around him, the swirling dust blurred the shapes of his enemies, relentless men closing in like hungry wolves. His eyes searched desperately for any sign of the twins, the two small shadows who had been his burden, his miracle, and now, in this cruel moment, his deepest loss. They were gone, torn from his grasp in the chaos of battle, swallowed by the unforgiving land and the fury of their pursuers. A silence heavier than death settled over him, the kind that seeps deep into the bones. Yet beneath that crushing despair, a flicker of stubborn resolve kindled like a buried ember. The pistolero was a man forged in hardship, tempered by many battles and scars, but never before had a purpose gripped him this fiercely, not until these two silent children had bound their fates to his. The distant clamor faded, but his senses remained razor-sharp. Somewhere beyond the haze, the old hunter's shadow loomed, and the gang's cruel voices still echoed faintly over the barren earth. But the pistolero's thoughts turned inward, to the strange pulse pressing against his chest beneath the amulet he wore. A heartbeat older than the desert itself. His fingers closed tightly around the worn pendant. It vibrated softly, like the last breath of a dying storm. He recalled the twins' whispered prayers in their ancient tongue, the sacred thread linking them to a legacy he barely understood, yet now lived to protect. Rising to his knees, painstaking but gleaming with renewed fire, he spoke aloud, voice low and certain, "I won't. Let this end here, not for you, not for what we carry." Every instinct screamed caution, yet defiance burned hotter. The riverbed was no longer just a place of desolation. It was the stage for a reckoning long overdue. Far beyond, the dust cloud signaled the approaching gang. Their leader's cruel grin was etched in his mind, the hatred in his eyes, the promise of finality. But the pistolero no longer stood alone in spirit. The silence he carried was filled with the echoes of the twins' courage, their unyielding will. The air shimmered faintly as he moved forward, limping but relentless. His mind retraced every lesson learned from the twins, their wisdom beyond years, their bond that had turned strangers into family. He had once seen them as mere currency, a transaction in a ruthless world. Now they were the miracle, worth every last breath. Navigating through jagged stones and brittle scrub, he slipped into the shadows cast by towering mesas. His keen eyes caught sight of a flicker, small shapes darting between rocks. Was it a trick of the sun, or the twins themselves? A sudden cry pierced the air, sharp and familiar. He stumbled toward the sound, each step a torment, every breath a battle won. And then, through the blinding haze, two small figures emerged, battered but alive. The twins. Their eyes met his, dark, fierce, and alive with something eternal. They were the living proof that even in the hard, merciless soil of the frontier, hope could root and endure. The pistolero gathered them both in trembling arms, the fragile warmth of their bodies breathing life into his weary soul. The wounded twins' shallow breaths steadied beneath his touch, the younger's grip tightening as if to anchor them all. "No more running," he whispered, voice cracked but resolute. "We fight together." Behind them, the gang's voices rose like thunder, closing the circle. But now, the pistolero was no longer the hardened man who bought children as goods. He was a guardian awakened, a father forged in fire, and bound by something deeper than coin or survival. The twins stood close, their silences heavier than any words. Their whispered incantations in the Apache tongue wove through the air, a subtle but undeniable power threading the desert wind itself. The land seemed to listen, shifting imperceptibly, the sun's glare bending, shadows lengthening. The final confrontation unfolded with brutal clarity. Gunfire cracked like lightning. Bullets tore the silence as the pistolero fired with precision born of desperation and newfound purpose. The twins moved with a grace not of this world, a dance of survival that blurred edges between flesh and spirit. The gang's leader charged, eyes burning with fury. But the pistolero stood firm, revolver steady, heart unyielding. They clashed amidst dust and heat, the air thick with the desperate weight of lives on the edge. A flash, a shot. The leader faltered. The cruel smirk wiped away. The others wavered, slowed by the ferocity of a bond no longer broken. When the last echo of gunfire faded, the silence that settled was different. It was heavy with the promise of change. The pistolero knelt once more, this time with no foe between him and the twins. He looked at their faces, marked by hardship but radiant with fierce life. "This land," he said softly, "is ours to protect." The old hunter's gang scattered like shadows at dawn, defeated not just by gunfire, but by a force they could not comprehend, the unbreakable ties of family, trust, and ancient blood. Days later, beneath the vast sky of endless possibility, the pistolero sat beside the twins around a small fire. The amulet glowed softly between them, a beacon of the miracle they had become. No longer a transaction, no longer a prisoner to profit. They were a family, forged in the dust and fire of the West, a living testament to the power of redemption, courage, and hope against all odds. The desert wind breathed through the canyons, carrying their story beyond the mesas and into legend. And as the sun set, painting the sky with hues of fire and gold, the pistolero smiled, a man reborn, holding in his arms the greatest miracle the frontier had ever known.